Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Leprechaun Alley. My name is Ray Carey Perillo, and this is my husband,
Michael G. Perillo.
very handsome man. We are astrologers, and today we want to bring you Western Chinese and Jyotish astrology. From today forward, we are going to be bringing you different presentations, conversations, and live readings from our channel, Leprechaun Alley, featuring these three different systems of astrology.
To give you an example, when we talk about three different systems, we have Western astrology, which is what most people know, of those who do know anything about astrology, and that is called sun sign astrology. In other words, it gives the name of where the sun is situated during the course of the year. So in that regard, sun sign, I am the sun sign under the Aries. Carry is a Sagittarius sun sign. Now, when we talk about Chinese astrology, we're dealing with a lunar calendar, and that follows the Jupiter, which is a 12-year cycle. So there are 12 years as opposed to Western astrology, which has 12 months. In addition to these Chinese signs, the Chinese signs can also be positioned in one of our Western signs. So one of the years will be combined with one of our months. So in that case, Carrie and I are both born in the year of the dog. The dog lives in the month of Libra, to give you an indication of how we start to take apart the astrological readings and start to describe the events and the qualities of each of these signs. Jyotish astrology is a very complex system that deals with mansions, houses, and segments of houses. And each of these describes certain qualities, especially as we place the planets in each of these positions, where they transit, what signs they're in, and what they mean. So Jyotish astrology can get involved in some predictive astrology, and it is in many times very effective. It is not 100%, nothing is. But we will start teaching this over the course of the presentations we give. Some of these will be involving other guests, and Carrie can describe more of what we plan to do.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you how we met. We met in New Mexico, in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, at a restaurant where I was working, where a mutual friend of ours, who is an artist and lover of mysticism herself, introduced us to each other. But we actually met each other ourselves
we met before the
before she
introduction.
had the chance
Right.
inadvertently.
I walked into the restaurant by myself.
And I'll let Michael finish that story.
I walked in by myself. My friends were outside in their car still for some reason. And I just casually went into the restaurant and I ran into Carrie, who was right there just as I entered the restaurant. And for some reason, I have no idea why. I usually, when I start talking about astrology, I will usually ask someone's birthday. But when I saw her, I just looked at her and said, "Fixed sign." And she responded and said, "No, I'm not," which surprised me completely because that meant she knew what I meant by fixed sign. I didn't say your sun sign or your astrological sign. I just said fixed sign. Of course, as I went and seated myself, or she seated me where I went to sit, and she came to me a little bit later to let me know that she was a Sagittarian. And Sagittarius is a mutable sign. However, her rising sign, which means the hour of her birth, is Scorpio, which is a fixed sign. And when we look at other people, the first thing we notice is the ascendant. Because in Western astrology, the ascendant represents how the individual awoke from the nebula, from wherever.
That's right. I love it. That's right. How we awoke from the nebula. That's our ascendant.
That's the ascendant. And so I noticed her ascendant first, and I was perplexed to hear her say no. But then she described that she not only was a Sagittarian, but she had Scorpio rising. The ascendant is Scorpio. And that is what I saw. Now, this story is not made up. This is exactly how we met. I didn't know who she was. She didn't know who I was until my friends came in right after me. And then they said, oh, we want you to meet Carrie. And I didn't know that I'd already met her.
That we already met.
Right.
Yes.
It was weird because it seemed almost as if some other power brought us together. My friends were still outside.
Yes.
And I just automatically looked at her. She wasn't even talking to me. She was just doing what she was doing. And I just looked at her. She looked at me and I said, fixed sign. This is unusual, but it happened. And this is what we will start teaching you, how you can become familiar with astrological qualities and components that comprise the individual and his behavior, his attitude, his preferences, and impossible to describe even what events might occur based on the conditions which are described by how planets are positioned, how they interact with one another. They're all alive, just as the Earth is alive, and these planets affect one another. We know that gravity occurs because of the planets all around us. Some planets are pulling us, some planets are pushing us. These affect everything that's on Earth, including human beings. And this is all that we're going to be teaching, is how the human being can react and may react. Some of the things that we'll describe will hit home 100%. Some of them won't, because we're not all made the same and we do have free will.
That's right.
We will never forget that in our presentations, that there is free will.
Although I will say this about free will. Free will is relative to your consciousness, or
Exactly.
another way is relative to your level of ignorance.
Exactly.
The more ignorant we are, the less we are able to exercise free will.
Exactly.
So don't get it twisted. We got to get to work.
Right. Exactly.
So what I want to do is give you a little sample of what our live readings are going to look like. Starting with Michael, I'm going to read Michael, and Michael is an Aries. He's year of the dog. He is a fire dog. So what they say about the fire years, well, the fire years, what does that mean? Well, we're going to go look at the decade. So of the decade, you look at the 0 and 1 years, that's metal. You look at the 2 and 3 years, that's water. You look at the 4 and 5 years, that's wood. The 6, 7, that's fire. 8, 9, metal.
What we also must remember is that when she gave you these numbers, these are the last digits of the year. So 1980 and 1981, or 1990, 1991, or 2000 and 2001, the 1 and the 0 is always metal. And when we go to 2002 or 1982 or 2022, this would be water, because the last digit is a 2. 2 and 3, so 2002, 2003 will be water years. And then we
are
on.
in the year of the water tiger right now.
We are now in the water tiger. It's the year of the tiger, but it's water. Let's understand that in China, these elements constantly rotate. So the animal repeats every 12 years, but each time it repeats, it changes its element. For instance, I'm born in 1946, 6 and 7 are the fire years. But in 1958, which is 12 years later, the dog returns, but now it's the year of Earth. 1970, 12 years later, it's the dog again, but now it's in the sign metal, which is what the dog's nature is. So we know that there are 2 elements that are important in China. That is the element belonging to the animal, the element belonging to the year. This will be described in further detail, but this is one way we can see how individuals can have the same animal sign, but not have exactly the same disposition.
Right.
Besides the fact that we have different ascendant signs, we have different sun signs, we have different moon signs. There's so much in astrology that has to be accounted for, but we will try to keep it as simple as possible so that you can practice it yourself. But we will also give you the details to how these things occurred and why they're important, so that you understand how it is that these things work the way they do.
So now I can read for Michael for you. So Michael was born March 29th, 1946. He was born year of the dog, and his element is fire, even though his original nature or his first nature is metal. So fire is very hard on metal. And as you can probably guess, sometimes Michael may overwhelm my metal. He has more power, he has more force, and he's more intense. But what happens is if we do get mad at each other, Michael runs out of steam very quickly, because what happens when you melt metal, it becomes water. So Michael just becomes a giant puddle again. He's a warrior. He fights for truth and justice. What you see is what you get. You have to listen, you have to ignore most of what's coming out of his mouth, because he's just releasing stress while he is. This is something I love about Aries. Aries can be the most brilliant, original, and authentic people because they're in action all the time. It rules the head. And they're involved in so much activity that they're very likely to make an incredible discovery. So even as he's at war, he's still writing poetry.
What was not mentioned is that we have this conflict with the element of the year. While the dog is metal all the time, so we both have metal in our nature, but the year is the way we have to act and perform that animal. In addition to that, what Carrie did not mention, and I'm sure she would have at some point, but I will, we're both fire in the Western zodiac.
Right.
So we have compatibility in Western astrology, whereas in China, there's a problem with the year,
Right.
not the animal.
Right.
But if we look at the Chinese element of the month, it gets more complex, because the Sagittarius, which is fire in our Western system, belongs to the rat in China, and the rat prefers water. While Aries, which is a fire sign in the West, is the dragon in the China, and the dragon prefers wood. Now in Chinese astrology, Sagittarius gets along very well with Aries because water promotes wood. So you have to factor these things in while you're looking at the other things. In addition to that, we have another conflict, our ascendant signs.
That's
Carrie
the roughest
has
one.
a fixed sign ascendant, Scorpio, which is a power sign. And my ascendant is Leo, which is a sign that brags and boasts. And so it has oftentimes false dignity, or it's overwhelmed with itself. Whereas the rat is using more knowledge, and China calls that the rat the sign of wisdom. Interestingly, in the West, Aries is raw fire, the creation. Leo is the fixed fire, the maker, the designer. And Sagittarius is the expressed fire, the exposed fire, knowledge. And such, the Sagittarius is the fire of knowledge, which agrees with China, which calls Sagittarius the rat, or the mouse, which is wisdom. So we see that the Chinese system and the Western system have certain agreements in the way they describe things. But we will describe this in more detail.
So what I want to also let you know is, for the future, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1 p.m., we will be doing live readings using the combination of Chinese and Western astrology to read for you there on the spot. The way that Michael created the system makes it so that we can give you an astrology reading right there on the spot,
Exactly.
just like a tarot reading.
Exactly.
It's so exciting.
We cannot do that with Jyotish because there's a tremendous amount of calculations involved. It's very complex, but it's also fairly accurate in terms of predicting outcome. Remember that with astrology, you can always predict outcome, but not necessarily be able to predict what results, the results of the outcome. That's up to
right. Was the score 10 to 13 or was the score 23 to 47?
yeah, we can't make that prediction
No.
accurate because there's so many possibilities. We have infinite possibilities. How in the world can we ever really estimate exactly? But we can get
Right.
pretty close.
Yeah, with Jyotish, what I do is I would look at the strength of the planets and the strength of the aspects, and that would give me what are probabilities. Oh, there's a strong probability. But again, the entire point of knowing astrology is that we can look at something that might be coming down the pike. And if we can't stop it, we can mitigate it. We can prepare. We can meditate. We can get support, all of those things. This is why it's so important. It's not something for us to cling to for dear life. We already exist. Our whole being is already intact. We're just wanting to show you how to work with the instrument that you already have and how different ways how it works. It's like the universe's instructions for what to do with our soul. So we're also going to have special guests that Michael had talked about earlier, and we will do special presentations. And the services that we offer, we wanted to now is the time to let you know that the services that we offer is we do an original chart casting and reading. Once we've gotten all of your details and everything, then we just have where we can do specific questions for you. I have a fun little email service that I'm offering as well, and it's just to give you the seed syllable for your birth nakshatra. So in India, well, those that have a Jyotish practitioner, they use the birth time and the nakshatra system to name their children, and they include the syllable based on the time that they're born into their children's name. So this is just a fun little piece for us to do. And also, I am a soul recovery coach. So I will also be providing that service as well. All of those services are available to order to book online. We have simply put a booking link with our video, and you can go through and book which services you would like to use.
The proof in what we do is going to happen when you get a reading from us. You will see that it's more than just hearsay, it's more than just guesswork, it's more than just coffee clutching. There is a real mathematical value in astrology, and that's the basis behind all the readings that we have to give. When we add particular aspects of these different systems, we're calculating the value of these things, almost like a mathematical value. And that's how we start to figure that out. Just as I described before, we're both fire signs in the West, but in the East, we have a slight problem because my year is fire, Carrie's year is metal, and they conflict. So we start to see the value. We have a positive on one by sun signs. We have a positive and a negative by Chinese signs. But when we go deeper in the ascendant signs, when we start looking at the moon signs, there's so much that we will be describing. And we'll give these descriptions at a steady rate, one in which you can absorb and understand. And you will find these very interesting and very, you should find it enlightening and fresh knowledge that you can gain about yourself and about the people who are important to you.
Fresh perspective is always good. You can't ever get enough of that.
That's true.
And so, before we conclude, before we conclude our session, I just want to give a shout out to these psychics whose videos I have been watching for the last year to get up the courage to start posting my own content. So the first is Linda G. Linda Grindle, the Comanche psychic. Next is Psychic Violetta. And the third is Sterling. The fifth is The Way of Positive Change with Lori. I want you to know that I have received readings from all, what did I say? All four of them. They have all been spot on. Never did their information ever conflict with anybody else's information. And I have to tell you, every time I spoke with a different person, it was like they were finishing the conversation. So thank you so much for that. And also, I am a huge fan of Black and Orange Tarot, The Way of Positive Change, Celtic Tarot, Intuitive View, Third Eye Champagne, and another huge inspiration for me is Joni Patry, who is an incredibly talented Vedic astrologer. So if you can't get enough of me yet, I want to give you these other options and well to go and check out their channels. They're all very, very talented. So that's all I have today. I don't know if Michael has anything else.
Well, for today, we're okay. Yeah.
So tomorrow we'll be back at 1 p.m. and we will be taking live readings. Have a great night or day wherever it is, or whatever time it is, wherever you are. Travel light and God bless.